Hello everybody, my name is David Piñol.
And I am Carme Duran. Both of us are from Instituto Verd de Catalunya, and we are going to show the results of an ongoing research which explores the impact of digital feedback in a context of distance learning for adult education. IOC is an online state school with more than 23,000 enrolled students per year that integrates all kinds of online non-compulsory education, graduate of secondary education, vocational training, upper secondary education, modern languages, and so on. In the research we are going to present, we focus in graduate secondary education. The objective of this educational stage is twofold. Firstly, to teach students basic life skills, very important in order to take part actively in society, and secondly, to obtain the certificate and to manage their lifelong learning. The students are adults who did not obtain the certificate in compulsory secondary education on time in Spain, that is, at 16 years of age. These former school dropouts are aware of their educational failure, and teachers must ensure these students rebuild trust in their academic capabilities of achievement. They need to rebuild their self-confidence and self-esteem. Moodle is the educational platform used in the interaction with the students. The course is modular and flexible in order to adapt to the needs of the students and their starting situation. Every module needs about 35 hours of dedication and lasts for one term, and students must do 4 main assignments in that period. Individual feedback will be given to each of these tasks. This online educational context is characterized by its flexibility and interactivity. But students must play an active role. He must interact with the teacher, classmates, and engage with the activities and resources he has at his disposal. This implies a higher degree of autonomy because they are responsible for their own learning. On the other hand, it involves more careful and personalized guidance from the teacher. One of the key elements of this learning process is the way feedback is performed. The teacher can guide and help regulate the learning process, taking into account the formative assessment that helps students develop awareness of their learning. Many studies have shown that feedback can be one of the most powerful influences on student learning, as well as reinforcing a positive attitude toward learning. Recent research focuses on the way students take advantage of feedback in order to improve their task performance. Feedback is effective only if the learner becomes a proactive recipient. That is, if the student tries to improve from it. But how can one facilitate students' involvement through feedback? There is evidence that feedback is not productive even though it is well received by the students. Some students do not read task feedback or do not use in terms improving in spite of teachers' work. Other research studies show feedback as more efficient in intermediate products than in final tasks. Our research focuses on the impact of digital feedback on the students' learning processes. Some questions need to be considered to understand the connections between assignment feedback and the effect this exerts on students' learning gains. In this presentation, we are focusing on 2 questions. Are students reading the teacher's feedback? Does it really have a significant impact on the students' learning process? I mean, what type of feedback do students tend to focus on?
The study was implemented during the fall term 2018 for 1,046 students from 9 courses, and that is related to the feedback given by the teacher in an assignment from the second unit. The sample subjects were selected as follows. Students from all areas and levels are represented, compulsory and elective modules. To answer the question if the students had read the teacher's feedback, we designed a survey that was linked to the teacher's commentary so that it could only be accessed through the feedback. We are assuming that it is difficult to know how many students actually read the teacher's feedback, and it's even more complicated to know if the reading has been attentive or superficial. However, we may assume that those students who have clicked on the survey link have read it. The survey included 8 multiple-choice questions and 1 open-ended one. The former were intended to find out the students' opinions regarding the usefulness of the feedback according to its content, extension, or clarity of information. The relationships between students who answered the survey and the obtained mark and the impact of the feedback on the students post-draft production. The last question asked students about the device from which they checked the teacher's commentary. The aim of this open-ended question was to recover the students' memories about the content of the feedback with a view to discovering which aspects they consider more relevant. This data has been compared with Moodle logs and students' qualifications. In total, there were more than 50 variables: when, what clicked next, from where, viewed, and so on. Of the active 1,046 participants that received teacher feedback, 84% consulted the gradebook during the following month where they were able to see their mark. 70% checked the feedback for the task. 51% did something with teacher's feedback, either clicking on the link to the questionnaire or repeating the task. 43% clicked on the link to the questionnaire, and only 17% of the students actually filled it in. In other words, we cannot know for certain the number of students who read the feedback given, but we consider it is more than 51% and less than 70%. This implies that at least 30% of students, that is to say, almost 1 in 3 active students, did not check the teacher's comments and therefore will not be able to use this feedback to improve their performance on the task, or said feedback will have little or no impact on their learning. Our initial hypothesis was that this might be related to the mark that the students got in the task. Very high marks or very low ones would probably render the comments for improvement as only minimal useful. However, the figures do not show any relationship between the two variables, mark received and viewed the feedback. We can observe that between 30% and 40% fail to check the feedback for the task, no matter what their mark was, final grade for the task, except in the case of the students who obtain a 10, of whom only 13% do not check their feedback. In other words, those who are awarded the maximum mark read their feedback more often than students who obtain lower marks. This does not seem to be connected to students dropping out. Among dropout students, the percentage who do not read feedback, for 40%, is slightly higher than among those who continue as active students, 29%. The dropout rate for those who check the task and for those who don't are similar, 9%, 13%. On the other hand, logs show some relevant information. Most students who check their feedback do so within a few hours after the task has been corrected by the teacher. That is because once a submission has been marked and moderated by teacher, students receive an email notification that feedback is available. 41% of students see the task the same day they are assessed, less than 12 hours, and 13% the next day. In all the modules analyzed, the percentages are similar, between 64 and 75, except in the case of SO2, one of the social science modules. In SO2, we analyzed 49 students, and it was the only module in which the main activity was a quiz with open-ended questions, whereas in all the other courses students handed in assignments.
Well, when analyzing the answers that the students gave to the open questions of how the teacher had assessed the tasks they had submitted, their answers could be classified into 4 different categories of analysis: emotional and personal aspects, acquisition of transversal learning strategies, assessment of the teaching work, and things that they had learned which were related to the task. First of all, we can see a great impact on the emotional aspects and improvement in their self-esteem. For example, when a student explains that he or she likes to see how her teacher values other tasks that she has done and how she encourages her to continue her studies of Catalan literature, like in this case. Students also value the cross-curricular learning strategies that are useful in their learning process. For instance, that students underline the importance of revising the procedure before submitting the activity in maths. There are as well a lot of comments related to the teacher's assessment. For example, in this case, a student assessed the teacher's work when he said, "I think he is a good teacher, and whenever I had an issue or made a contribution, he responded and solved it immediately." But on the other hand, there are fewer comments in relation to specific contents than those related to the aforementioned categories, even though in some cases, as in this quotation, they were more detailed. But in general, they are less frequent. The research has allowed us to draw some conclusions on 3 different aspects. As for the first aspect, the reading of feedback, the results show that a high percentage of students, 1 in every 3, do not read the teacher's comments. This is especially worrying in a learning context whose virtual learning support is based on the improvement of the students' self-regulation tools and gives a key role to the teacher's feedback as a tool for formative assessment. The profile of the students who do not read the feedback is not related to the quality of the task, not to the educational level of the student, as there is a similar percentage of students who do not read the feedback independently of their marks. On the other hand, most students who check their feedbacks do so immediately after the teacher's submission, which shows the motivating effect of the warning sent to the student's email. Relating to the impact of the teacher's feedback on the student's task, the results also show that students greatly appreciate positive feedback and highlight its motivating function. In this sense, the results of previous research shows that the teacher's positive comments reinforce the student's positive attitude towards the studies. This is especially important in second opportunity contexts, like that of the IOC. Students also appreciate the comments related to cross-curricular learning strategies and to procedural support, which might serve them to carry out both one specific task and the tasks of other courses or subjects. Such support is very important in distance education, where the students must have a certain degree of autonomy and for this reason must adopt some self-regulation strategies. However, the results also show that the teacher's comments do not have much influence on the specific learning strategies needed for any given task. In relation to the third aspect, teaching in a virtual learning environment, the results show the need to rethink the students' action as soon as they receive the teacher's feedback. If the feedback is part of the student's learning process, we must design activities in which the students necessarily have to resort to their feedback. This leads us to think about the need to design activities that require the students' more active use of feedback. And that's all. Share with you these references, and if you have any question, we were pleased to answer it, no or through email. Thank you very much.